Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Once again, the treatment of journalists by the Modi government is the big story of the day. And so today we ask, is this an attempt at intimidation? Is this a deliberate attempt to throttle free speech and, more importantly, criticism of the government? And now have we reached a point where perhaps it's no longer an exaggeration to compare the situation today to the 1975 emergency? Joining me now to answer those questions and discuss what's happened on Tuesday is the former editor of the Business Standard and the former chief information advisor to Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was Prime Minister, Sanjay Baru. Sanjay Baru, on Tuesday, 200 policemen raided 46 journalists in 50 houses and offices spread through Delhi, Gurugram, Noida, Ghaziabad, and Mumbai. Does that look to you like a fishing expedition as an attempt to intimidate and threaten journalists?
Yeah, it's like a fishing expedition going on a huge ship to catch one fish. I mean, the scale of operation is to me a sign of the incompetence of the police, that they have to launch on something like this 3 years after their initial criticism of this particular website, not having found any, obviously, evidence to bring before the court next week. So the answer to all your questions, Karan, is a simple yes. I mean, this is intimidation. This reminds one of the emergency, and this is certainly the lowest point in the freedom of the media since the emergency. But having said that, Karan, give me 2 minutes to make a very, very different point, because I know personally the individuals involved. You know, I come from Hyderabad. I lived in Delhi for the last 33 years, but before that, my first 33 were in Hyderabad. And one principle that, you know, we all Hyderabadis feel very proud is that we are loyal to our friends, and we know our friends. We know whether these guys are corrupt, anti-national, incompetent, whatever. And when somebody is that, we unfriend them. I will give you 2 examples of friendships I keep. One is Asad Owaisi of the MIM, a junior of mine in school, and the other is Tarun Vijay, former editor of Panchajanya and a member of the RSS. Both Asad and Tarun are our friends. I disagree with them. I disagree with Asad's communalism as much as I disagree with Tarun's and RSS communalism. And yet I can say that neither Asad Owaisi nor Tarun Vijay is anti-national, or that they'd ever do anything anti-national. The second set of people I refer to is the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, and the leader of the CPM, Sitaram Yechuri. I've known both of them for a long, long time. Sitaram from my school days and Jaishankar from my university days. I disagree with Jaishankar on many issues. I disagree with Sitaram on many issues. But I would never say that either of them is anti-national, despite the fact that they're polar opposites ideologically. I think, you know, jumping to such conclusions is not in the interest of this country. So when it comes to NewsClick, Probir Purkayastha and D. Raghunandan, two of the senior people associated with NewsClick, as well as Sohail Hashmi. These are all people I've known for 40, 50 years. I know they're not anti-national. I disagree with them on many issues. In fact, in 1991, I parted company with my friends on the left because I was supported Narasimha Rao on his economic reforms and liberalization, etc. And the left at that time vehemently attacked whatever Narasimha Rao was doing. And we parted ideological company. And yet I say none of them is anti-national. None of them would do anything against the interests of India. When the nuclear deal was being discussed, people accused Jaishankar of being too soft on the Americans. Even someone like Kakodkar of the Department of Atomic Energy has written an autobiography in which he makes critical remarks about the foreign minister. People accuse Sitaram Yechuri of being a China agent and preventing the nuclear deal.
Sure.
And yet we know that Jaishankar is not anti-national. He's a patriotic Indian. And Sitaram Yechuri is certainly also not an anti-national. He's a patriotic. So just give me 30 seconds. I want to make this larger point in the context of the debate that is going on in this country, calling people anti-national, putting them behind bars, etc. That, we are cheapening this accusation by, calling all manner of people who disagree with us anti-national. And I think there's a very, very dangerous moment in our democracy.
I take your point entirely, but let me focus our discussion a little bit more specifically on what happened on Tuesday. And after that, I want to come even more specifically to the accusations raised against both Prabir Purkayastha and Amit Chakravarti of NewsClick. Many of those 46 journalists who were raided either in their offices or their homes have told the media about the sort of questions they were asked. They were asked whether they had covered the farmers' protest, whether they had covered the Citizenship Amendment Act protests, whether they had covered the Delhi riots. Most journalists would have inevitably, dutifully covered all three. What is the relevance of asking these questions? Surely they are not suggesting that to cover these events is somehow anti-national.
Certainly not. Not just cover these events. A journalist is duty bound. It is the dharma of a journalist to be there when the news is being made, whether the news is good news or bad news, whether it's man biting dog or dog biting man, the basic lessons of journalism, you report it. I remember when I made the switch from academia to journalism in 1990, I met the very senior and highly regarded journalist Nikhil Chakravarti, editor of Mainstream. And I said, "Sir, I'm switching from being a professor to becoming a journalist. What is your advice?" He said, "Look, don't sit in the ivory tower. First lesson of a good journalist, be on the ground. Your feet have to be on the ground. Meet anybody and everybody who think is of news importance. Cover everything that you think is of relevance." This is the basic dharma of a journalist. If you're not covering what is happening in Manipur, like so many of our TV channels, if you're not covering what is happening in Kashmir, like so many again of our TV channels, you are not doing your dharma. This is not journalism. That becomes propaganda.
So what you're saying is that the three issues that these journalists were questioned about are issues that would have been part of the dharma of journalists. Had they not covered them, they would have been remiss and irresponsible. And by suggesting that by covering them, somehow these journalists were being anti-national, creating a mood of disaffection in the country against the government, the police, in raising those questions, is not only out of line, but clearly suggesting they don't like journalists probing into matters that are embarrassing for the government.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I'm really surprised that these kind of questions were even asked. Let me draw attention to one more issue, which is the whole accusation about publishing wrong maps. It's something that happens very often in India now, because many of us in the media and academia download maps from the internet. You're asking something.
Can I stop you there? Because we are now veering into the charges specifically made against Prabir Purkayastha and Amit Chakravarti. Let's discuss those specifically. I'm going to rely, when I ask you the questions that follow, on what, according to the Hindu, the police has told them, and the Hindu has published it in quotations. And the Hindu says that the police, in turn, was relying upon the enforcement directorate. There are three sets of accusations. First of all, according to the Hindu, the police claim that Purkayas and Chakravarti received Chinese money and used it, and I'm quoting, to create disaffection amongst various sections of society. One presumed example of that is to create a false narrative to discredit the efforts of the Indian government to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you make of that?
It's laughable. First of all, on this issue, I know hundreds of business persons in India, including from the state of Gujarat, who have been doing business with China. Do we call all of them anti-national? Now, as far as the accusation of their receiving some funds from suspect Chinese sources, that is something for the government to investigate. And if they have evidence, they should come with this evidence. That's a completely different issue. Let the investigation proceed and let the evidence be brought forward. And that is a serious charge. But, the fact is that any business dealing with the Chinese, today, India has a trade deficit, one of the highest trade deficits with China. What does it mean? It means hundreds of thousands of Indian businessmen are making money out of doing business with China. So the Chinese issue, but on the issue of disaffection, causing disaffection, of course, if a newspaper or a media channel causes disaffection, they should be hauled up and then make the charges specific. But covering of any anti-government protest is not causing disaffection. And that has to be the distinction we make.
Let me ask you specifically, one of the issues that perhaps was raised by journalists about COVID-19, and they were raised specifically by me in all the interviews I did, was to do with the deaths and whether the actual tally of deaths was underreported or accurately reported. And many people suspected the government was not telling the truth. Secondly, about the efficacy of the Covaxin vaccine and whether it had been properly cleared or whether the clearance itself was expedited to try and facilitate a claim by the government that we have an Indian vaccine. And thirdly, questions were raised about the treatment of daily wage workers who were forced to walk hundreds, if not thousands of miles. Now, if in raising those questions, you can be accused of creating disaffection against the state or the government, then surely the word disaffection is being misunderstood and the police are over-interpreting whatever powers and laws they're using.
Precisely. And enough number of journalists have written. Barkha has written an excellent book on COVID. This has been widely reported. I mean, the facts are there in front of us. And merely reporting these facts and raising questions is not anti-national. It is not creating disaffection. And as far as the efficacy of the vaccine is concerned, I remember when I took my first vaccine, I asked my doctor, I said, "Doctor, how confident are you that this vaccine will work?" He said, "Look, these vaccines are there. Everybody is using them. There's no harm. How confident am I? I cannot tell. I took the vaccine. I got COVID after taking the vaccine." Right?
Absolutely. Let me come, Sanjay Baru, to the second charge, as reported by the Hindu, who I am emphasizing are quoting the police, who in turn have said they are quoting the enforcement director. The second charge against Purkayas and Chakravarti is the following. And again, it's in quotations. The police have secret inputs which have revealed that Singham, the American who's been allegedly funneling Chinese money, and Purkayas exchanged emails which exposed their intent to show Kashmir and Arunachal as not being part of India, thus undermining the unity and territorial integrity of India. What do you make of that? This is not that they downloaded a map, but that they were actually intending to create maps which show Kashmir and Arunachal as not being Indian.
Well, if any such map is published, it is certainly a criminal act. It is anti-national act. And if any website has published such a map, naturally the law will take its own course. And if the police have evidence of that, they should present that evidence. But on this map issue, let me tell you an anecdote. Recently, I was sent a paper written by a serving officer of one of our armed forces wings. And it had a map which actually showed, the Western interpretation of our borders, which do not show Pakistan occupied Kashmir as part of India, though they show Aksai Chin as part of India. And immediately I called a certain gentleman who was his boss, saying that, look, this chap has published this map in his paper. You are all the armed forces of India. How did you make this mistake? And immediately he checked, he apologized to me. He said, sir, this problem arises because often we download maps from the internet. And many of these maps are generated by Western institutions or centers, and they do not show POK as part of India, right? Now, United States is our strategic partner. America is our friend. And yet American establishments do not show POK as part of India. And many of us are downloading those maps because we are all dependent on Google, which is an American website. None of that is anti-national. And this gentleman was a very senior official, wears a lot of badges on his chest, thanked me profusely for drawing my attention to that. Immediately that map was removed and the correct map was put. People make mistakes.
Absolutely. And the point you're making is essential, that if, there's a big if there, if a mistake was made, it is not tantamount to being anti-national. That is a leap that is utterly unjustified.
Absolutely. But if it is done deliberately, then of course the law should take its own course.
I should point out here that the police have provided absolutely no proof, not even a shred of proof that this was done deliberately. They are relying upon what they call secret inputs. We don't know what they are, obviously. They're relying upon mails that they've trailed, apparently some 4.27 lakh mails, which is a huge number. But the important thing is, all the journalism done by NewsClick is on its website. Everyone sees it. Everyone can therefore check whether such a map exists. If it did, the police could have produced it as evidence. The fact that they haven't suggests they don't have the evidence. They're only relying on this mysterious, unidentified, unexplained, secret input. That's almost, to me, as if you're trying desperately hard to provide proof for an allegation which doesn't stand up.
Yeah, I mean, I had a higher opinion of Delhi police. I mean, this is really height of incompetence. This makes you feel worried. I live in Delhi and hope for the protection of the police here. But if this is their level of competence, it certainly worries me.
Now, the third charge against Purkhayast and Chakravarti, and this time now I'm quoting from the Express, and this is equally, to my mind, not just bizarre, but forgive me to use a colloquialism, mind-blowing, friendship with Gautam Navlakha since 1991, and the fact that Mr. Navlakha has been a shareholder of NewsClick since its inception in 2018. Now, I mean, is friendship with someone who may be charged with something horrible, but it's not proven in his cases yet, tantamount to the person who's a friend being anti-national?
Certainly not. And I can say, I've known Gautam Navlakha also for many, many, many years, although I've not met him in a long time. But when you are in the media, when you are in academia, when you are in this social kind of interaction with a large range of people with different ideas, you tend to meet all kinds. I mean, I've had a personal meeting with Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, the chief of RSS. Now, some people may say, oh, were you currying favor with the RSS? Why did you go and meet Mohan Bhagwat? Well, I met him. He's a head of a very important organization. And as someone trying to understand my country, I found my interaction with him extremely interesting and helpful. Tomorrow, if I'm writing something which requires me to talk to a senior Nakshal leader, I will talk to him. That doesn't mean I agree with Mr. Mohan Bhagwat about his politics or with the Nakshal leader about his politics.
Absolutely. Let me point out, just as politicians in their line of work meet all sorts of people, and often people who are accused, sometimes people who are convicted, sometimes people who for other reasons are morally repugnant. And that doesn't make the politician an accused or a convict or morally repugnant himself. Similarly, journalists meet all sorts of people. It's required of them. And just because they're meeting them doesn't mean anything at all.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the first principle of journalism, that you meet anyone and everyone if there is news there.
Absolutely. Now, not so long ago, according to the Indian Express leader, Chief Justice Chandrachud said, and I'm quoting, national security claims cannot be made out of thin air. And secondly, Chief Justice Chandrachud also said that protection of critical views critical of the government, is vital to the health of a democracy? Doesn't it seem as if the police have ignored both statements made by the Chief Justice of India?
Indeed. And I'm glad that my old newspaper, the Indian Express, wrote a fine editorial this morning quoting Chief Justice Chandrachud on these points. And I think they've finally done a great honor to the memory of Ramnath Goenka, who was one of the tall editors who stood up against the emergency. We were all students during that period. We opposed the emergency and we hailed Ramnath Goenka as a great publisher. I hope today the rest of the Indian media has the courage to say that what is happening is wrong, it's an attack on the freedom of the press, and that whatever the criminal charges against anybody, let the law take its course. But this kind of intimidation and harassment is simply not acceptable.
You referred to the emergency, and today's Hindu leader deliberately compares what's happened on Tuesday to the emergency. The leader says, and I'm quoting, "Today, history seems to be repeating itself, but without even the fig leaf of a declared emergency." Would you agree?
Precisely. And that fig leaf was important. I mean, the sociologist Gyan Prakash has written a fine essay making the point how all of what the government did during the emergency was with due process, that there's nothing illegal, that Indira Gandhi did not do anything illegal. She used the law of the land as it existed to do whatever she did, right? It's an interesting argument. But the system was far more competent, obviously, at that time. But on those words, Karan, I'm afraid I'll have to end.
Two very quick questions before you go. You were personally present at the protest staged by the press club yesterday, but I'm told no editor of any major newspaper, no editor of any major news channel was present. What do you make of that?
That's a sad day. It's a sad day. I remember still the photograph of during the emergency of this procession of editors, B.G. Varghese and
Arun Shourie,
Arun Shourie, B.G. Varghese, Pran Chopra, Kuldeep Nair, all the great distinguished editors of this country walking down Rajpath. And where are those editors today? It's a sad
they
day.
are letting down the profession they hold.
Absolutely.
One last question. How should civil society, and more particularly journalists, respond to what's happened?
Well, I don't know. Everybody will respond in their own way. I'm not there to advise people on how they should respond. But I think all of us should be concerned, should be worried, and should certainly let those whom we know that this is not correct. What is happening is not correct. It is not in the interest of the country. That's the fundamental point I keep making, that these do not serve national interests. And to pretend that the interests of one party or one individual is the same as the interests of the country is a pretense I reject.
Sanjay Baru, thank you very much indeed.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.